Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, so let's dive right into this. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating and honestly incredibly relevant topic. We're looking at a huge point of confusion in our modern world, the blurring lines between what is simply our culture and what is actually religion. It's so easy to mix these two up, right? But this confusion kind of leads to some profound misunderstandings about who we are and, well, what we're actually meant to be doing.
Which brings us to a really crucial question. Are we worshiping our culture? I mean, think about it for a second. Most of the time, we take our cultural norms, the way we dress, the specific groups we associate with, our regional habits, and we literally elevate them to the status of religion. So we really have to ask ourselves, have we accidentally turned our very human, completely natural need to belong into a rigid, divine mandate? Let's see how this unravels, and we're going to start right at the very beginning of the human timeline. Section 1. The Great Equalizers. How birth proves a point.
To understand how the divine actually views human identity, we can look at direct observable evidence. There's this fascinating verse from the Quran, Surah Fusilat, chapter 41, verse 47. It reads, "And no fruit emerges from its husk, nor does any female become pregnant or give birth without his knowledge." Now, think about this for a second. With literally millions of things happening in the universe, why choose to specifically mention pregnancy and birth in the context of human groups and judgment?
Well, it brilliantly illustrates the answer. Just compare an American birth to an Indian birth. Everybody is born exactly the same way. An American is born the exact same way as an Indian. Birth is a purely divine process, entirely devoid of human groupism. There are absolutely no cultural labels that affect the biological process of arriving in this world. There's no VIP treatment based on your nationality or where your parents happen to live. Pure arrival. Zero identity. So the really crucial point here is that the divine baseline simply does not consider groupism or earthly identities as part of this process. We enter this world completely pure, without any inherent groups, cultural labels, or societal tags attached to us whatsoever. It is complete equality and absolutely zero cultural identity. Section 2. The Need to Belong. Navigating the Messy Middle. So if we arrive with zero identity, what happens next? Well, we enter the noisy part of life where we try to find our tribes. Culture is defined here as a completely worldly affair. It's something very specific to this world, to this life. It's fundamentally about where we want to belong. People who like America want to be called American and follow that culture. Those who want to associate with a specific faith group are going to act, talk, and dress like them. It's essentially a practical mechanism for finding our tribe, and it's completely separate from absolute religious truth. To prove this point, just consider the immense diversity of Muslims globally. A Western Muslim is going to be entirely different from a South Indian Muslim, who is completely different from a North Indian Muslim, while a Malaysian Muslim represents a totally different world altogether. Why? Well, because we simply behave and become a part of where our family and friends are. These wildly diverse cultural expressions of a single faith are driven almost entirely by regional societal expectations, not by divine law. There's a genuinely fascinating historical point to really hammer this home. When Prophet Muhammad became a prophet, he didn't suddenly start dressing and talking like Prophet Abraham did, he? He could have easily said, well, Prophet Moses carried a stick, so I'm going to carry a stick too. But he didn't. He simply followed his own local Arab culture, because that was where he belonged. His cultural expression was totally local, even though his religious message was meant to be universal. And honestly, there is an incredible irony in modern cultural imitation. Today, a lot of Muslims around the world are busy trying to follow traditional Arab culture, thinking it equates to the religion itself. Meanwhile, the Arabs themselves are busy following Western culture. It perfectly exposes how fluid, earthly, and frankly arbitrary these cultural trends really are. Section 3. The Danger of Conflation. Confusing the worldly with the divine. Now this is where we hit the core crisis addressed in today's explainer. The real danger happens when we start treating these earthly choices as absolutely essential for spiritual salvation. Take this verse from Surah Al-Mumtahana, chapter 60, verse 8. It notes that God does not forbid dealing kindly with those who haven't fought you over your faith. The huge takeaway here is that while believers are allowed to react if forced to abandon their actual faith, there is zero need to react aggressively if pressured about mere culture. Why? Because forced culture lacks true spiritual significance. Society expects us to dress a certain way, like, say, in India, where there isn't always total freedom of dress. We follow it to belong, but it's just a worldly phenomenon. Nobody is facing divine punishment just for dressing a certain way. This actually leads to a pretty provocative idea from the source text. Even the word Muslim functions heavily as a cultural identity tag. It operates as an identity group exactly like Indian culture or Pakistani culture. There are people out there who don't believe in God or perform any prayers, yet they're still categorized as Muslims. And that's because that term, in a purely worldly sense, is often just a cultural tag used for societal belonging and survival rather than a definitive marker of actual internal belief. To really solidify this, think about our tools for earthly survival: money, Bitcoin, a house, a car, and right there alongside them, cultural identity. Group identities belong in the exact same category as your Bitcoin or your car. They are incredibly useful for navigating life, doing business, and finding a community. They literally help us live. And as long as we view our cultural identities as useful worldly tools, well, that's perfectly fine. The danger only creeps in when we start considering these tools to be divine.
Section 4. The ultimate reality, the great equalizer of death. This brings us to the final stage of the human timeline, where all those worldly survival tools completely lose their value. Compare dying in America with dying in India. When we're dying, everyone is exactly the same. Everyone goes through the exact same biological and spiritual process. Just like with birth, there is no group VIP treatment. It is a pure, inescapable divine process where your cultural tribe simply cannot intervene. The theological argument here returns to the Quran, specifically Surah Fasilat, chapter 41, verse 48. Regarding the Day of Judgment, it says, "The deities they invoked before will have vanished, they will know that there is no escape." Ultimately, this means that absolutely all of those earthly identities, the cultures we worshipped and the constructed groups we clung to for survival, they will all completely vanish. The divine reality simply does not tolerate worldly identity tags. Which brings us to a final, profound thought. We spend our whole lives building up these cultural identities, right? We adopt the dress, the language, and the tribal tags just to survive the messy middle of life. But if the absolute divine reality strips all of that away at the very end, when all those identities finally vanish, what is truly left of you? Think about that for a while. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it sparked some deep curiosity for you today.